David Leith,
Um,
who I was talking with
thank you.
recently, he's got his book, which is up here somewhere. There it is, right at the top there. You might see there it is.
Uh-huh.
Rise and Fall and Resurrection of Brian Smile. And David always says that the dominoes have got to line up, and you're going to
Yeah.
that being sent, anonymously to the guitar school that almost started something for you, that didn't it? The sort of a domino was in place for you then to
Yes,
start.
well, what happened was that one of the other things that was worth mentioning was that the year that I went to that guitar school was the year that an LA club band made up of people very much like me, my
Okay.
age, very much into the Beatles, into the Beach Boys. They had a giant hit with this group was called The Knack, and the hit was My Sharona.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the main takeaway of My Sharona was that could be me. That could be my friend who's in a band. That could
Yeah.
be any of us playing in the LA clubs. Look, the Knack made it to I don't know if they made it to number one, but that was a
Sure.
giant
Mm,
international hit.
yeah.
That could be me. And that none of us had ever thought that we could ever, get a record deal or even make any
Mm,
money. I mean, some of
mm,
us are playing, I would sometimes playing in weddings, go to
okay.
some and play covers of the day or old Frank Sinatra songs, whatever they wanted to hear. We would
Yeah.
do our
Okay.
best to play them. So at least, a minimum of money would be made because most of us are playing in bands in which it actually cost us money to be in these bands. You'd have
For
to
sure.
pay the gas money. You'd
Yeah.
have first have to buy an amp and an
Yeah.
instrument.
Yeah.
Then you have to take
Absolutely.
all this time with the band to learn either the new songs.
Yeah.
Mostly it was original material in these bands, these club bands. So you were
Okay.
learning the songs of the lead singer or the guitar player, the keyboard player, whoever was the songwriter. So you're
Yeah.
putting a lot of time into it. And then you're going out and you're playing at clubs for which you receive no money, maybe a beer, maybe one
Tell you,
beer.
even in those days, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I know now it's like everybody wants everything for free.
sure.
So I've started going to restaurants saying, I'm coming here because I'm going to get a free dinner, aren't I? And beer thrown
Hmm.
in. They say no. So, but yeah, no. So you didn't get a lot for, no, just a beer or two and a little bit. Right. Yeah.
And so it was a labor of love mostly. We
Yeah, for sure.
were, and we got to know each other in the other bands, and we go to support each other. We'd
Right.
say, "Oh, look, you know, uh, I'm trying to think of some other band's name. Possum Dixon is playing down at
Okay.
Spaceland. I'm gonna go
Okay.
down. I mean, I know the guy at the
Yeah.
door. He'll let me in for free. I played
Lovely.
there so many times. I
Okay.
have all these drink tickets. Eventually, I started being able to drink a beer for free because I wouldn't often. They'd give you two drink tickets sometimes, and
Okay.
I'd use
Okay.
one and put the other one in my wallet and bring it out
Right.
next week when I was back at the same club.
Okay. Good one. I like that. Fantastic. So, right. So Wondermints, really. So, let's delve into that a little bit and where that took you. Because at that time, were you doing editing work as well? I was going to ask you about your sort of day job because weren't you an editor?
Yes, a day job that I had for 27 years that at one point I was working there full time in the 80s, and then at night I was in that wedge band I'd mentioned, the
Mm,
surf band had morphed
yeah.
into a top 40 band. We were playing Prince, Dan Hartman, I Can Dream About You,
Okay.
the Thompson Twins, whatever was going on, from like 82 to 85 around that time. We
Right.
would play at a club, 5 sets a night, not all week. Maybe twice, two or three times a week we do, but we'd be playing a lot, like till 1 or 2 in the morning, 5 sets. So eventually I think my body couldn't take it. So around 1986, I came down with hepatitis, which
Oh,
the Centers for Disease Control showed up at my house, the federal agency, and we
oh.
went over with a fine-tooth comb to try to figure out where I got this disease, so that
Mm,
they could nip it in the bud in case there was an outbreak at a
hmm.
certain restaurant or maybe
Sure.
a club I had played or that sort of thing. And
Right.
we never got to the bottom of it.
No.
Otherwise, other than that, there had been a sewage spill at the ocean, and the guitar player Johnny Baltimore and I had gone in the ocean,
Ah,
and he was
ah,
so sick
Ah,
We didn't know that there had been a spill. There was no.
that's it.
We found out later it was announced, and meanwhile we were
Right.
just blithely going into the ocean, and
Yeah.
I had a rash on my.
Yeah.
I can't remember if he or I had the rash on our side, but I came down with hepatitis in short order after that.
Goodness, that's surely
Um,
that's the source of it. Yeah, sure it would be.
yeah. So anyway, I only mentioned that because why? You were asking about my day job, right? So I think it was because I was doing too much. I was working a 40-hour work week, editing reports at an economics place called ERA, Economics Research Associates, which I
Okay.
was the editor there for, as I say, 27 years. Um, and then at night, I was doing either playing in club bands or doing this top 40 stuff with the wedge.
Okay.
And it was just too much. I don't think my
Yeah.
body could take it anymore.
Sure. Sure.
So when I came back from the month or so, I was out of commission, and
Mm.
I stopped doing the top 40 band and just
Mhm.
concentrated on one or two original bands.
Okay.
So eventually, jumping ahead to the Wondermints, when Darian introduced me to his friend Nick, who was
Yeah.
also a big Beach Boys fan,
Yeah.
um, they had a band going. I don't remember. I can't remember if it was originally called Wondermints, but anyway, I really liked the band. And once in a while, they'd need another guitar player, or they would do a song, maybe a cover that had a trumpet. So I would be the guy that would get called to sit in with them, which I
Great.
did. And eventually I sort of wormed my way. It was the same thing with the Negro Problem. It was a
Yeah.
band that I very much liked. They sounded like The Fifth Dimension meets
Okay.
Burt Bacharach
All right.
meets something more
Something.
modern. And I really
Okay.
liked that music. So I
Yeah. Yeah.
wanted to play in that band. And in
Okay.
both cases, I was able to insert myself by stealth into the
Stealth.
band. And
I like that. I love that sort of thing. I really do. Yeah. By stealth, you sort of going around the back and then coming in all of a sudden. Yeah.
right. And I'm not sure how it started. The connection with Brian Wilson. I mean, I'd first met Brian years ago in the late '80s. I was once coming into a rehearsal a little bit early, and as I was passing this one door, I heard what sounded like Brian singing in the room, and I asked the manager, the rehearsal room manager, who's in there? He said it's Brian Wilson. I said, oh my God, I'm never going to have another chance. So I knew it was wrong, but I knocked on the door. It was Brian. He was the only one in the room. It was just a tape player and him. He was
Wow.
apparently rehearsing for some TV show he was going to be doing. This was
Yeah.
around the time of the first solo album, like
80,
89,
88. Yeah.
88, 89.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I don't want to bother you. I just can see you're working. I just want to say you've been really important to me. Your music means so much. Thank you for being. And I shook his hand, and then I got the hell out.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So I thought, well, that's it. I've met Brian, and that's wonderful. That's probably the last time I'm ever going to see him. But uh, I'm trying. I know what it was. I used to be involved in a charity group, and it's actually still am, called Wild Honey.
Oh, yes.
They
Okay.
it
Yeah.
they used to do concerts, and the proceeds would go to older musicians
Mm.
who had been cheated out of the money, so that they were penniless,
Um,
even though they had a song that
yeah.
was in regular rotation on the oldies station. And eventually, it morphed into an autism research charity,
Okay.
Wild Honey. So we would do the songs of, say, the Kinks or the Who, and
Mhm.
at one point, our little orchestra with many, many guest singers was doing a night devoted not even to the Beach Boys, but to Brian Wilson alone. So, and unbeknownst to us, here comes Brian and a little entourage. He came to his own charity concert,
Oh,
and I could
yes.
see him in the audience, and I was supposed to sing Surf's Up.
I
I
remember
was very
hearing about that.
nervous.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh,
That's
I
not
was
the
so
easiest
nervous.
song to. Whoa, that's not an easy
No,
song
it
to
was a
sing.
hard song. So the Wondermints were appearing as part of this, and we did Our Prayer, Surf's Up, and maybe This Whole World, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow. Great.
anyway,
Wonderful.
Brian was apparently Brian was heard to say after the show, "Geez, if I had these guys back in the day, I'd have taken Smile out on the road."
Yeah.
I don't know if he really said that, but it was supposed to have been said.
Yeah. It's quoted a bit,
Uh,
isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So we were then on his radar, and about a year or two later, this is like I want to say this was 1994 or five that we did that show with the Wild Honey with Brian Wilson. And about 95 or 6, we got a call saying, "Hey, I've got to do a radio show." Or the manager said, "Brian Wilson's going to do this radio show. He wants you guys to back him up." So we did. We played Darlin', Do It Again, maybe God Only Knows. I can't remember what we did, but we backed him up at this radio show. And something happened during that radio show that's worth mentioning. We're rehearsing beforehand, and we're doing the song Do It Again, which is in the key of E flat. So we're going along, and suddenly Brian stops. So, of course, we stop, and we don't know what he's up to. It's about where the bridge would have happened in the song. He just stops.
All right.
And then he starts playing the piano in a very different key. I think it was A major. He began
Mhm.
playing a boogie woogie. And suddenly
Yeah.
he stops and he says, "Oh, yeah." And suddenly he went into the bridge of Do It Again in the original key, which is A flat, a very different key than he's just been playing at. He somehow remembered whatever the chord was,
Yeah.
which was, I've never seen anyone do that. Like to free up their brain, they began playing a song
Boogie
in
woogie.
another key, and
Boogie
suddenly
woogie.
the
Yeah.
answer came to them.
Yeah.
I was telling the anecdote of him playing and Do It Again, and then
Yeah.
stopping, and then
Yeah.
doing a boogie woogie in another key, and then he came back in with the right chord
Yeah.
in another. It was just it sort of freaked us out. The Wondermints
Yeah.
were like, "That's not human. What just happened?"
No, I tell you who he was doing that. He was playing with a female artist. He was doing some backgrounds, I think. I forget who it was now. And he had to stop and he went to the piano and did exactly that. And she was saying, "Well, that's not going to work." And he came back with it 100% spot on.
Yep.
Amazing. And
I'll,
you and I,
I'll
you
tell
know, I
you a little
think,
corollary story about that has to do with that kind of thing. When Van Dyke Parks and Brian were together making the album Orange Crate Art,
yeah,
which I
yeah.
believe was 95, I think.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
it was. Yeah,
it was almost all the vocals, or maybe the entirety of them, were by Brian.
that's right. Yeah.
And at first they started out and it was going well. And then for some reason they got off the rails a bit. And Brian said, "Someone send for a bucket of ice." So the ice was brought into the studio. Brian took his head, put it down. He put it down into the bucket and
No,
came up streaming water and cold,
no,
but awake. And he said, "Roll the tape." They recorded, dead on. He killed it. He nailed
no.
it.
That's
So
amazing.
that's not the end of the story.
Right.
So
Okay.
they then were doing what they call sweetening, which is at the last minute they were putting on things like orchestral instruments,
Yeah.
and so here come these A-list session people into the session, and Brian is one of these people who is very impatient. He wants things to be done right the first time,
Yeah.
and so what happened was some of the parts were a little hard.
Mhm.
So here's an oboist, say, and he's
Okay.
playing, and Brian says, "I don't know about that. Let's get the bucket." So
No,
they'd call for the bucket of ice and they'd make the oboe player stick his head in there.
never.
And then hopefully he would play it right.
That's incredible. I've never heard that before. How amazing. How about the rest of the orchestra? Did they have to? Oh, oh,
Well, I think
amazing.
at the sweetening time, usually it wasn't a full orchestra. Usually it was like one
Yeah.
at a time.
Yeah,
Players would come in and play their
sure,
part.
sure.
But
How
yeah,
amazing.
imagine having 40 buckets of ice, one next to each player.
Goodness me. I mean, when you did, yeah, well, we won't jump into Brian Wilson's Present Smile because we are jumping a heck of a. I mean, yeah, that's remarkable. And he and Van Dyke did a very nice job with Orange Crate Art, I think. I
Yes,
like,
I rather enjoy that record.
yeah, very much so. Very much so. And so where are we? Wondermint. So then you started where were you then? I mean, you were really getting
Okay,
involved with Brian big time.
sure. So then we began inviting Brian to come out and sing with us if he felt like it, which was great for us as Wondermints because the people would come out expecting and hoping to see Brian's, and he would usually do it again. For some reason he was fixated on that song at that era in the
Okay.
late 90s.
Okay.
So and he was almost always early. Like if we said, "Hey, we're on at 10 p.m." Brian would be there at 9.
Okay.
at the club, and people would be like, "Look, it's Brian Wilson." And anyway, finally, it came to be in late 1998, I guess it was, or I can't remember when exactly this happened. It was around Christmas time. I got a call from the Wondermints manager saying, "Hey, how would you guys like to fly out to St. Charles, Illinois and audition to be in the Brian Wilson band?" And we're like, "What?"
That's amazing.
And so that's where he was living at the time because
Yeah.
his wife and Joe Thomas's wife,
All right.
they
Yes.
were very good friends, and
Friends.
Joe
Yeah.
Thomas had a mansion built right next to Brian's in St. Charles, Illinois. They were neighbors. In fact, we used to joke that there was a tunnel going between the two houses, which I don't think there was.
Yeah.
But anyway, we did get flown out, and we passed the audition, which was kind of amazing. And I mean, at the Bruce Johnson, I believe, had been asked to be part of the band, and for reasons of his own, had decided against it.
Okay.
But there was Jeff Foskett was there, and a lot of people that Joe Thomas knew from being involved in the Imagination album that were Chicago session people, like Jim Hines on drums,
Okay.
Bob
Yeah.
Lizik on bass.
Music. Yeah.
At that time, Scott Bennett was only a background singer, which later changed, which I'll
Yeah.
get to in a minute.
Okay.
Taylor Mills, another background singer.
And they were
So
all
we,
they were all Chicago, um,
right,
Chicago
Paul von
based.
Mertens. I'm
Yeah.
sorry?
Paul Von. They were all sort of Chicago area people, really
Yes,
much. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and Joe Thomas knew them because he would give them, they were like first call session
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, we got together in early '99 in the snowstorms of that time, and I try to remember what date our first show was. It was in, I believe it was in March,
Okay.
March 10 maybe?
Okay.
March of 1999. We did our first show in somewhere in the Midwest. It was either, I remember it was Ann Arbor, Michigan,
Okay.
and we didn't know if he was going to make it. I mean, he was very fragile. Brian was. We when we first had auditioned, he Brian wasn't even there. It was just Joe Thomas and the rest
Right.
of the guys.
Right.
Um, and Brian looked really fragile, emotionally, and we didn't know if he was going to be able to, make it past it. But he did. We played in Milwaukee, then I believe Chicago area, and I can't remember where the next shows were. But that summer we went to the East Coast and did a little tour, and finally went to Japan. And it was we were in Japan, and at the I think we were in Osaka. I was like, the theremin had broken, so I had it open and I was trying to solder it together. And someone said, "Hey, you guys from Chicago, was Joe Thomas on your flight?" And they said, "No." They said, "Well, where is he? Has anyone talked to Joe?" No one had. So finally, someone made the long distance phone call, and he was answered. He was in Chicago, and we said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Oh, well, I couldn't get my visa together."
Oops.
Bullshit. Everyone knows that Joe hated to fly, but
Ah.
so he wasn't there. He
Oh.
wasn't going to be there for the Japanese shows. So I will say so Darian, so Joe Thomas was the main keyboardist and musical director. Darian, mostly Darian, if I remember right, taught Scott Bennett the whole show on keyboard
Never.
between sound. Yes, and so he did. I don't even. We must have cut maybe that first show down, and maybe it was a short show because
Okay.
anyway, to his benefit, Scott, who was a great multi-instrumentalist, plays good
Amazing.
bass, drums, guitar, and
Wow.
as it turns out, keyboards. He came to the rescue, and we finished up our little short Japanese tour. At the end of which, the Wondermints flew out our bass player from Los Angeles, and we did a club show at Club Quattro in Tokyo. Which we it's funny that Wondermints is rarely played outside of our hometown in Los Angeles, but we have played in London once, and we have played in Tokyo once.
Remarkable. Good stuff. I like it.
So then we were off and running. Then it was the Brian Wilson band with oh, by the way, so Brian, at the end of the Japanese run, we do this sort of spirit circle before each
Yeah.
show.
I
And
love
we were
that.
in the spirit circle, and he said, "Hey guys, it sounds pretty good without Joe. What do you say that when we get back to the States, we just keep it like this?" And everyone was like, "Yeah, that
Yeah.
feels
Why
good.
not?
Why not?" So that's what happened, and we went on to, you know, I won't say fame and fortune, but we had a nice long run.
Oh,
23
remarkable.
years. 23 years I was with the Brian Wilson Band. And as you know, of course, Smile came to be in that time, and also Lucky Old Son, which I consider to be maybe the number two
Yeah,
best work that we ever did with Brian was that album.
super
After,
album.
of
Yeah,
course, Smile being number one.
yeah, absolutely. It's up there somewhere, I think. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, for sure. And
Right.
and what was I going to say? So, how did Brian, even in the late 90s, he was very fragile at that point. How did he get through, or you help him get through those fragile episodes and difficulties, do you think? How did he manage that?
Well, he was on a certain amount of medication that kept him on a steady state.
Okay.
He had an envelope that his handler or manager or wife took out, once or twice a day. And he had these pills that were trying to keep him chemically balanced inside. And, as happens with a lot of these drugs, sometimes you have to tweak the recipe
Yeah.
because the old formula doesn't either is not
Mhm.
efficacious or
Okay.
has to change.
Right.
Um, and so that was something that certain people that were in the organization over the years, that has included Jeff Foskett, has acted as what I'll call the handler, who's
Yeah.
someone that generally stays at night with Brian in the hotel room
Yeah.
and keeps him from. Sometimes Brian would do weird things. He'd wander out into the hallway or out of the building, and
Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I know many things that Brian did that will never leave my lips, because
No,
just because they make him
no,
look bad, and it was just
sure not.
because
No.
he just wasn't right. He
Yeah.
wasn't all there mentally.
Yeah.
You can't blame him for doing some of these things. I mean,
No.
he didn't break any laws or do a
Of
crime.
course not. Of course
But
not.
anyway, so we all cared deeply about Brian. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a tragic soul, but capable of such art and such monumental art that really affected millions, billions of people with his
Absolutely.
music. You
Absolutely.
know,
And he was
and
a loving man and a spiritual man, wasn't he? A very loving
yes,
guy, cared for people. I mean, I met him the one time after a Smile show. I was wearing that T-shirt, actually. That's how I got in. I think, um, I think it was the Portsmouth show. You were over, we'd been to the festival hall. I think we'd seen
Mhm.
that. We'd been twice, haven't we? So, and we just had to get as many gigs as possible. It was just that music um, saved my soul, I think. It was
Sure.
just mind blowing. And I've
Yep.
shown a few of my friends some of the concerts on YouTube, and they were just sat in silence, really. Then, and at the end of it, like, yeah, amazing. And it really was. It really was. It was amazing. It was. I mean, the people who were interviewed afterwards had come thousands of miles almost to get to the Royal Festival Hall to be there,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
we
I
would.
remember some people coming from LA,
Mm,
some of our LA friends that they couldn't stay away. They had to get a plane ticket and come on over and see the Royal Festival Hall show.
Yeah, but going before, obviously, when you were putting it together, and Brian had those difficulties. I mean, that he sort of cleared off and went to hospital one day when you were starting to rehearse, didn't he? When you were starting to put the vocal sessions and things together, didn't he clear off and
Yes,
book
he
himself in
did.
the hospital one time?
That's true. That's true. There's been a couple of times he's self-admitted.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
in fact, one story I wanted to tell, just because it's sort of corollary to this. Um, at some point in the early 2000s, we were in Toronto about to go on stage, and we were standing there waiting for the announcer to make the announcement. And Brian said to us, Toronto, Toronto, Tonto. Hey, did I ever tell you guys about the time that Tonto made a pass at me? And then the announcer went, and here's Brian Wilson. We all went out on stage. And meanwhile, all of us are thinking, what did he just say? Tonto? What? And it turned out to be true. What happened was it was during one of those times that Brian had self-admitted himself to a mental rehab place and at like a psych ward. And in this same hospital was Jay Silverheels, the actor who had played Tonto in The Lone Ranger, the old
Really?
TV show.
Yeah, I remember it for
And
sure. Yeah.
apparently Jay was gay, and Jay made a pass at Brian. And I'm sure Brian said, no, thank you. But meanwhile, the word Toronto sounded like Tonto. And
Oh, I love that. What a story that is. Man, have you got any more like that, Probyn? Just throw 'em at us because I mean I love it when the band were everyone's interviewed for David's book and like or videoed and Darian would come up with some cracking things about how Brian would make you laugh so much or you know
yes.
yeah, I mean that's
Yeah,
great.
and he had a very dry sense of humor. Sometimes I
Yeah.
didn't get his humor.
Okay.
Some of it's really very obvious. Like when you think of the thing called that a bunch of us used to think was part of Smile, but it turned out not to be. George fell into his French
French
horn. You know
horn.
that
Yeah.
snippet where they're
Yeah.
sort of talking into their brass
Yeah.
instruments.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was apparently that was part of going to be the part of the comedy
Comedy.
album that
Mhm.
Brian was working on with Hal Blaine. It was going to
Yeah.
be a like
Yeah.
they did a skit that you can find online. I'm sure you probably already
Yeah.
have the snippet of when they're in. There's like a vegetable stand by
Yeah.
the side
Yeah.
of the
The
road,
vegetable stuff. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. For sure. That was
That was
great.
part of that same thing too. I asked Hal about that one time when he was still alive.
Yeah.
Um, I said, "Hey, what have you ever thought about trying to get the comedy record with Brian going again?" He said, "That's a great idea. I'll see if I can, get a hold of his manager or whatever." And it never came to be. They never
Sure.
resumed work on it.
No.
But
Well,
there's
count.
lots of things like that, like the album with Fred Vale, the country album that hasn't.
That's on it. That's on its way, isn't it?
I
By the
think it
sound of
should
it.
be released early this year. It ought to be released.
Yeah. Fred is a great guy. He was
Yeah,
a
I like
real.
Fred.
Yeah. What a man. And I think it's in the concert album when it says, "I'm from Los Angeles, California. I want to introduce Today's Boys," or something.
Right.
Yeah, what a guy, I mean, what memories.